Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us all. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Director General of Early Childhood Education, Primary Education and Secondary Education, Ministry of Education and Culture, Research and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia, Honorable Bapak Iwan Syahril. Honorable Head of Delegations from the ASEAN Member States, Timor-Leste and the ASEAN Secretariat. Honorable Director of UNESCO Office in Jakarta, Dr. Maki Hayashikawa. Distinguished delegates, esteemed speakers, participants from ASEAN Member States, Timor-Leste and the ASEAN Secretariat and beyond, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning and a warm welcome to Jakarta, Indonesia for the Southeast Asia Policy Dialogue on Early Childhood Care and Education. My name is Rahmat Idris. It is my distinct honor to be your master of ceremony throughout the day today, and we extend our highest appreciations for your presence today. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Southeast Asia Policy Dialogue on Early Childhood Care and Education is an annual meeting attended by all ASEAN member states, and thus allow us now to extend our warmest welcomes to our delegates hailing from Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Laos PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Timor-Leste as observers. Let's give the biggest round of applause for everyone in the audience. Thank you very much for being here. And it is also such a distinct honor for the government of the Republic of Indonesia to host the Southeast Asia Policy Dialogue on Early Childhood Care and Education to gather us all here in the beautiful and sunny morning in the capital Jakarta, Indonesia. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, commencing our program this morning is the Indonesian National Anthem, Indonesia Raya, followed by Semio Color. Please rise. seated. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and now please have a listen to Simio song.
It's time to open our eyes to a bright and promising future. We'll rise to the call of the times and create a stronger tomorrow. Let's start to make a difference, teaching everyone to learn through science, health, and technology. We will share our expertise by promoting knowledge and policies. We can build a better world. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and green. Here at Simio, building the future is our legacy. We'll achieve our goals through partnership, creating opportunities. By working hand in hand, we can accomplish all our dreams. For a better quality of life is now within our reach. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and green. Here at Simio, building the future is our legacy. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and green. Here at Simio, building the future is our legacy. Building the future is our legacy. At Simio,
What an uplifting song. Let's give the biggest round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Simio and the early childhood care and education across Southeast Asia. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, to continue to unfold our program this morning, we are privileged to invite a very special welcoming remarks. May we now welcome the Director General of Early Childhood Education, Primary Education, and Secondary Education, Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia. For the remarks, please give a warm welcome to Honorable Bapak Iwan Syahril.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all of you. Selamat pagi. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. The honorable senior officials from the Ministry of Education from ASEAN member states, the governing board members of Simio CECCEP, high officials from the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia, representatives of multi-sector ministries, delegation of the ASEAN Secretariat, delegation of UNICEF, delegation of UNESCO, delegation of World Bank, representative from Tanoto Foundation, representative from ARNEC, esteemed speakers from all over the world, and all the honorable invited guests. It is a great honor for me to welcome you all to the 3rd International Conference of Early Childhood Care and Education and Parenting, held under the theme of Resilience and Universal Quality in ECCE in the post-pandemic era, lessons from ASEAN and beyond. I'd like to express my warm gratitude to all delegations and participants. Your attendance and participation plays a critical role in realizing the objective of this event, and this accelerating the quality of early childhood care and education in our world. The objective is placed at the center stage considering the powerful potential of the early childhood care and education in changing the lives of our children. It lays the foundation of personal success and sustainable society. Being that in case, the expected outcome and objective of this event resonates with the global spirit in realizing the Sustainable Development Goals Target 4.2. In 2030, our education systems all around the world should be able to accommodate all girls and boys to have the access of quality early childhood development care and pre-primary education to be ready for the next education levels. In this regard, I'm glad to remind us that this occasion also marks a significant and historical milestone for both Indonesia and all fellow ASEAN member states in our efforts to accelerate early childhood care and education transformation, especially in the context of the global learning crisis worsened by the COVID-19. In the wake of the post-pandemic challenges, the transformation of the early childhood care and education has become more crucial more than ever. We have seen for ourselves how the pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in our education system. Among others are limited access to quality learning, inequality across different socioeconomic backgrounds, learning poverty that hindered our students to gain meaningful knowledge during the years of schooling. And at the same time, the pandemic has also presented an unprecedented opportunity for us to innovate and to accelerate progress for a more robust system. The shared realization of the opportunity has led to global initiatives to reimagine and rebuild education, including pre-primary learning. Countries all around the world are working for the efforts to accelerate the education quality, to leverage the use of technology for interactive learning, and to integrate social-emotional development in early learning. This transformation has encouragingly led to a more inclusive, resilient, and adaptable early childhood care and education services. Yet, our journey does not end here. In accordance with the sustained recovery from the pandemic, it is high time for us to create a resilient curriculum that address the challenges of the sustainable development, global citizenship, gender equality, climate change, and environmental challenges, as well as inclusive education. In the case of the early childhood care and education, the newly reimagined system should be able to prepare our children to be future ready. With specific regards to Indonesia's efforts to ensure the transformation of our early childhood care and education, Indonesia is committed to establishing an inclusive service through properly designed mechanism of planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Under our policy umbrella called Merdeka Belajar, or Emancipated Learning, we are focused on ensuring a quality learning process by providing, engaging, and student-centered learning that supports our children to unleash their potential from early childhood. With this vision in place, we are aiming at creating a smooth transition from early childhood care and education to primary education for our children in a holistic manner. In line with the fundamental spirit of Merdeka Belajar, or emancipated learning, we aim to turn policies into a grassroots movement. Transformation of early childhood care and education rests upon mutual collaboration among and between related stakeholders. We involve schools, local governments, teachers, parents, and public communities in realizing holistic integrated service that serve as one of the primary goals in the agenda of Indonesia's early childhood care and education. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, with the spirit of the transformation through collaboration, we sincerely wish to resonate the spirit of gotong royong that served as a fundamental value during Indonesia's G20 presidency last year. This year, through Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship, we aim at enhancing regional cooperation in the acceleration of the early childhood and care education quality. In this regard, we welcome your participation during today's conference that is held as part of the Southeast Asia Policy Dialogue event. For the next 2 days, we will also observe the ministerial meeting in parallel with an academic conference. It is my hope that all of us will engage in fruitful and meaningful discussions that will contribute to the development of the early childhood and care education service for the children of ASEAN and beyond. There are more than 200 participants representing different countries in the Southeast Asian region and beyond, and it is such a wonderful opportunity to have high officials from ministries and government agencies, representatives from higher education institutions, international organizations, and other stakeholders to gather here today with one strong commitment to improve the quality of early childhood care and education service. I'm also grateful for the presence of the keynote speakers in both the plenary and parallel sessions from Indonesia, Ireland, New Zealand, Japan, Canada, the Philippines, Brunei Darussalam, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, Singapore, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Your contributions to this conference are truly appreciated. I'd also like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for the unwavering support of the ASEAN Secretariat and the hard work of the committee that has been working hard to prepare for this event. Through this occasion, the government of Indonesia is proud to continue the leadership from the G20 Education Working Group, and we feel pleasantly honored to host this historical moment under this year's Indonesia ASEAN chairmanship. At this point, we hope that the existing cooperation in the field of early childhood and care and education will be significantly enhanced. I hope that today's conference will serve as an opportunity to unite various ideas by sharing best practices in early childhood and care education across Southeast Asia. Together, I strongly believe that we can build a better future for our region through greater and better investment in early childhood and care education. Last but not least, I wish you all to have a productive and meaningful discussions and dialogues that will contribute in the making of ASEAN as the epicenter of global growth. With this remark, I declare the third International Conference of Early Childhood and Care Education and Parenting is officially open. Thank you all very much. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bapak Iwan Syahril, for the warm words of the opening remarks this morning. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, proceeding to the next agenda, we are extremely honored to invite special remarks from the Director of UNESCO Office in Jakarta. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Maki Hayashikawa onto the stage.
Need the technical support here. Thank you. Okay. So we're just waiting for the PowerPoint to start. First of all, selamat pagi, good morning everyone. My name is Maki Hayashikawa. I'm really honored to be here with all of you this morning. A very warm greetings to distinguished delegates, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also very honored to be join you and speaking before you this morning in the Southeast Asia Policy Dialogue on Early Childhood Care Education starting today. I'm particularly and personally happy that I'm actually here, as this is my very first public event after assuming my new position here at the Director of UNESCO Jakarta, that this is actually on early childhood care education, which is very, very close to my heart. Now, on behalf of UNESCO, I'm please first allow me to express my sincere thanks, gratitude, and appreciation to the organizing committee, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology, Simeo Chechep, ASEAN Secretariat, Tanato Foundation, and the Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood, or ARNEC, as we know very well. I would also like to particularly recognize the presence and appreciation to Dr. Iwan, Syahril, Director General of Early Childhood Education, Primary Education, and Secondary Education of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia, Professor Vina Adriani, Director of Simeo Chechep, and of course, one and only Dr. Iche Tojeda, Executive Chair of the Indonesian National Commission for UNESCO. Now, I hope this slide is there. Good. Okay, let me just put on my glasses as well. So, although it is a keynote, I felt that it would be much more useful if I could just set the scene for the 2 days conference starting this morning. I'm of course speaking in front of all those who are experts in early childhood. I don't need to convert the converted already, but I thought there would be some usefulness to just kind of remind where we stand in this post-COVID era. Now, I start with these figures. As we know, COVID actually presented us with humongous numbers. I think this is something that came about. We came about with this big number called 1.5 billion learners in the world who lost the opportunity to continue their education during the height of the pandemic. We have another big number from the ASEAN countries. 140 million children and adolescents could not go to school because of school closures during February 2020 and February 2022. Now, if we zoom in a bit more into pre-primary education, at one point at the height of the pandemic, over 93 million pre-primary students in 34 countries where we had data, and also 4.4 million pre-primary teachers in 24 countries were affected by COVID. Now, this all meant that there were many children who could not continue learning, especially early childhood, where usually countries only have 1 or 2 years of education. This is a very serious situation when we think about the future of these young learners. It also means that nearly 5 million, 5 million children were at risk of not returning to pre-primary education in 2020, which means that many of these children probably are not back in education anymore, or they are in primary schools without having any good school readiness experiences prior to entering primary education. And then just one last figure to share is 67 million children who missed out on vaccination, basic essential vaccination between the 2 years or 3 years of the COVID pandemic. Of course, these numbers are not to scare anyone. We are getting in a better shape today, but I think it's also important the magnitude of the impact of COVID-19 that had on the education sector overall, and also particularly for early childhood. And of course, lastly, the $1.6 trillion is the lost future earnings due to COVID-related pre-primary school closures in 2020. That's a lot of loss from an economic point of view as well. So how do we respond to COVID-19? The global community immediately reacted, and there were many guidelines, frameworks, I would say guidance how to respond and react to the COVID-19 at all levels of education. There were 4 rounds of UNESCO, UNICEF, World Bank joint surveys on national education response to COVID-19 school closures. There are dozens of studies and research on the impact on COVID-19. Many of you have participated in those surveys and studies over the last 2-3 years. There were specific guidelines on teachers, also on how to monitor, how to collect data, and also a lot of advocacy and communication materials. Now, assessment of impact of COVID-19 has also become one of the regular features of any periodic monitoring reporting by countries today, like the SDG 4 midterm reporting, the national statement that were produced for the Transforming Education Summit last year, and also even the UN voluntary national reports by countries, everyone actually now talks about the impact and the post-COVID situation on education. Now let us zoom into the ASEAN context. The ASEAN countries have developed their own regional response to COVID-19 and guidelines to reopen, recover, and strengthen resilience of their education systems. It's worth noting here is that the ASEAN guidelines actually prioritize pre-primary education and early learning, recognizing that the crucial role played that early childhood plays in children's development and school readiness. Actually, not many COVID-19 response guidelines policy briefs give specific attention to early childhood or pre-primary education. So I think this is a worst point to be noted, especially for the ASEAN countries, that there has been a particular attention to this level of education. Now, since the outbreak of the pandemic, and then the gradual closure of schools, with its height reaching in April 2020, numerous studies were conducted. And that is, these are the studies that we are now basing many of our response strategies and also follow-up and how to cope with this post-COVID situation. After 3 years into the recovery phase now, we can say that there are enough information, data, and evidence to present a consistent picture of the impact of COVID-19 on our education system, including early childhood care education. In the Asia-Pacific region, I would say that several surveys were carried out specifically on early childhood to understand how the pandemic has affected this particular subsector, which is quite well documented today. But unfortunately, in terms of quantitative data, I think we still have a lot to work on. But among these findings, the direct and indirect challenges that ECCE workforce faced probably were the most significant compared to the other levels of teachers, levels of education. As we can see from these findings, of the joint survey, pre-primary education teachers received less support on all fronts, whether for financial support, material support, technical or training, or even for mental, psychosocial well-being support. Teachers' ability to respond to the crisis was thus hampered by the lack of prior knowledge and remote on how to cope with the crisis management, remote teaching, as well as the lack of access to internet equipment for remote online teaching and learning. Now, the global school closures due to the pandemic also revealed how important these education institutions were for all learners, but particularly for the very young children, the most disadvantaged children as well, as early childhood care education centers often serve not only as a place of learning, but also for delivery of and to benefit from the health and nutrition provisions, a protective, safe environment, and also especially for the disadvantaged children. Thus, reopening of ECCE centers should be a priority in a post-COVID era, just looking at the longer-term recovery of the education sector as a whole in the country. Now, while COVID-19 had devastating impact on the entire sector, many of the challenges faced, particularly for the early childhood care education workforce and the centers, of course, they were not necessarily newly emerged issues. I'm sure you will agree to that. They were not necessarily brought about just because the pandemic happened. These were very deep-rooted systemic challenges that already existed, many of them since pre-COVID times, such as a lack of trained and qualified ECCE workforce, the absence of developmentally appropriate ECCE curricula, or of course, a low investment in ECCE. This means that, in other words, the short-term emergency response to pre-primary education in light of COVID-19 is not going to do us so much well in order to have a sustained longer-run efforts to rebuild a resilient, transformational ECCE systems. And while COVID-19 may have exposed those pre-existing compounding challenges with a lot of huge numbers that we saw earlier, I think this is actually the most important data to keep in mind today, is that still today, pre or post-COVID, that 1 out of 2 children are not receiving or is not receiving pre-primary education in this world today. Now, so I just want to zoom in a little bit on data here, although we do still lack a lot of data with the most recent years. But if we look at the regional status and trends in ECCE with reference to SDG 4.2, which is our guiding target for the field, despite the expansion and increase in enrollment in general over the world and also within this region, we still see large disparities within the region in both enrollment in pre-primary access as well as the level of children under 5 who are developmentally on track. This region also has one of the largest number of pre-primary education teachers in the world, with the majority being female, a trend globally also observed. Yet the people-teacher ratio is again very different across the countries in the region. The disparity does not seem to close very easily, whether it's because of COVID or not. Now, this feature about income level really matters in pre-primary education as well. Now, it seems that richer countries, the countries with higher income level, do tend to have more opportunities for children to access pre-primary education and hopefully of quality. The wealth index, particularly for the region Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific, also show that when you look at the different index of children's participation in early childhood, you see the sex, location, wealth. The wealth index actually shows you the widest disparity across countries in the region. Another important point, which of course SDG 4.2 talks about, is the provision of 1 year of free and compulsory education. Most countries in the world have not really yet adequately met this target. Out of the 193 countries with data, only 63 countries have adopted free pre-primary education. 51 countries have adopted compulsory education, but the majority are in the upper middle countries or high income countries, and only 46 countries so far we know have managed to adopt both free and compulsory education in that middle there. Now, ECCE, as we all know, remains to be chronically underfunded, unfortunately, and there's a huge disparity across the regional countries as well in how much the government is investing in their early childhood care education. And we don't have that much data that is updated enough, so this is where we hope that the countries also around this room will be able to look into this matter during this conference and also beyond. I must say that unfortunately, the development partners also spend less than 1% on pre-primary education investment, so we need to also advocate for more investment globally from the international aid community as well. So now, what's next? We see the situation, the impact, where we stand. We have now marked the 3rd year since the onset of the pandemic. Where do we stand and where should we go? This, the example of this What's Next report was produced jointly by the group of the UNESCO, UNICEF, World Bank, OECD. Unfortunately, this report doesn't really focus on pre-primary education, but it does highlight a lot of common challenges that could be relevant for all the education sector as well. So some of the information that I'm now providing will be based on that report. Now, first, according to the latest joint survey, the 4th joint survey by UNESCO, UNICEF, OECD, and the World Bank, countries in ASEAN are gradually moving towards steady recovery in education, and adapting to the new environment, new normal that ECC sector has been placed. You see that half of the ASEAN countries are now adopting a mixed modality for delivering pre-primary education. Some are now fully in person, but some are also still very much hybrid. But I think the sector is now trying to adapt to the new situation that we are faced with. Now, we also see that children are returning to schools, teachers also suggesting that they are slowly receiving support, both technical, moral, psychosocial well-being. This is coming from the latest studies also issued by UNICEF. But then, using a framework called framework called RAPID that was jointly developed together with UNICEF, World Bank, UNICEF, UNESCO, UK, USAID. Although the survey doesn't necessarily focus very much on pre-primary education or early childhood care education, You can see that across the world, there has been many countries making significant efforts to ensure the continuity of learning during school closure, as well as the provision of comprehensive support in the reopening of schools today. Although many interventions have been introduced to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic in the short term, countries are now also looking into longer-term solutions and building on this momentum to transform education in the longer term. So policy actions that's now taken need to be supported and sustained over the time to address long-standing challenges, ensure future system sustainability, and achieve national, regional, and global goals. Now, looking ahead, to really achieve a transformative education, including early childhood, we really must continue to push several policy actions addressing these 6 priority areas. First, we have to really reach every child and keep them in school by eliminating barriers to vulnerable and marginalized groups, ensuring that the right to education for all is fully captured in national, legal, and regulatory frameworks. We also need to ensure that assessment of learning levels are regularly conducted by broadening the scope of assessment and competencies to be developed and assessed, such as social-emotional skills. And we should also leverage the technologies now that become more familiar to the early childhood education care scene as well for assessment purposes, and also to use hybrid modalities to monitor children's growth. Now, thirdly, we need to continue to prioritize teaching the fundamentals with consideration for integrating social and emotional learning in classrooms. Involving teachers in co-designing and facilitating curriculum adjustments will be critical to adapt to the rapidly changing environment in the early childhood setting as well. We would also like to see that there will be more efficiency in the instruction provided, delivered, making teaching, especially ECCE teachers, an attractive profession by enhancing teacher well-being through adequate remuneration and working conditions. We also probably should invest in digital transformation education systems and also train teachers to be able to fully utilize the technology available for them to deliver high quality education and learning opportunities. And then, of course, we want to ensure that we continue to develop psychosocial health and well-being, which have in many countries now has been put in place, but to strengthen that system in a collaboration across the different sectors, bringing education, health, nutrition, social welfare together, and so that the early childhood centers will be the center to provide comprehensive services. We want to also promote good hygiene practices and health protocols, and complementing this with longer-term investment in safe and reliable wash facilities, for example. And lastly, but not the least, of course, we want to have sustainable and equitable education financing. This is really essential in order to recover and transform education. And it requires a lot of financing commitment in order to mobilize the entire community. Additional resources are needed through also innovative instruments as well. So I just like to, before closing the presentation, I just like to also focus on 2 other issues, more like a trendy issues today in the world. And these issues are not going to wait for us until we fully recover and rebuild the ECCE systems to become more resilient. And then the first one is, of course, about climate change and environmental degradation caused by that. With over 21.3 million people displaced in this region, Asia Pacific, in 2020 due to natural calamities, this is the region that is most impacted by natural disasters and climate change in the world. So it's something that we cannot neglect, ignore in the early childhood education as well. Now, climate change directly threatens education and ECCE young children's development, learning opportunities, and their well-being. In short, climate change directly impacts on the right to education and basic services for these young children. It happens because there is destruction of schools and properties. It can put education in peril by forcing people to cross borders. It doesn't really help us to ensure that the legal residency or the right to education of these young children if they are on the move. Research also has shown how climate-related displacement results in disruption not only in education, but also negative impact on young children's mental health. They will be subjected to post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depressions, and these conditions often persist, affecting health and brain function in adulthood. There has been also many researches that has been revealing that children are extraordinarily vulnerable to climate change and air pollution. And so there's abundance of studies, especially growing over the last 20 years, on the critical impact of climate change and air pollution and environmental degradation, causing serious harms on children's health and developing their brains, even when they are in their mother's womb. Now, the understanding that climate change and pollution affects the developing brain has grown over the last 20 years, but also we need to address the impact of climate change related to disaster. It's an opportunity for us to be able to revise and also integrate other elements in the early childhood curricula. We can also promote more child-centered and develop an appropriate curricula to prepare young children for the future to be able to adapt to the new environment of climate change. The second issue is that is really coming to us in a very forceful way today, I must say, is really about the impact of artificial intelligence, new technology, and social media. Now, of course, AI, there's a lot of discussions going around on the pros and cons of how much AI should be introduced in education, but also many on early childhood learning. There are not enough, I would say, that there isn't really sufficient research available yet to really make a firm conclusion of what really the impact would be. But then at the same time, COVID-19 has made technology much more familiar and closer to the education environment. Now, there are good things about it. AI can improve education opportunities through virtual mentoring to school management. AI-enabled learning tools can also shown to help children to learn how to collaborate and develop critical thinking, problem-solving skills. They can also be very adaptive learning platforms, and can also AI-generated platform can also help provide personalized learning experiences. There are also AI beyond education. They are being introduced in the health sector, of course, to diagnose illness and also helping monitoring child health over the years. And so we can also see that, introducing more AI skills and knowledge in early childhood can help these children to grow in a world and be better prepared for the future of an AI-powered workforce. But of course, there are a lot of concerns and risks involved, which we are not fully aware of, but there are already a few elements that are coming up. First and foremost concern is probably about the children's data privacy, the privacy and safety of children exposed to AI and new technology, and how much do we can allow young children to be exposed in front of new technology like that. Then, of course, there are many AI policies now being under development by countries. For those, we need to make sure these are more child-specific considerations to take into account. This is especially important as the impact of the AI-based technology are not well known on children. Second, there is also the legal and ethical concerns, whether there is a need to set a legal age limit, for example. There's some discussions happening around legal age for children's independent use of sensitive technologies, for security reasons, for emotional development, for the security of children. Maybe there is a need for a more rigorous supervised use of AI for younger children. And also systemic and automated discrimination exclusion. This is about over-profiling, because AI is usually used systematic generation of analytical data, which can actually just by no default, but and discrimination, exclusion of certain population. And as such, also, it could also exacerbate the digital divide and disparities across countries, within and also between countries, not only because they have access or no access to technology, but also the skills and the use and how to manipulate this technology as well. And of course, the bottom line for early childhood is that AI cannot replace the human interaction in early learning and teaching, and AI should not be providing ethical decision-making or providing moral emotional support. So AI is not here to replace the human interaction. After all, education is all about human interaction, but we also need to see how much benefit that teachers can also get by with the AI helping them to provide their learning, teaching provisions more efficiently. So the year 2022 last year was actually a major education year globally. Never before in the past has education received so much celestial level of political attention, I would say. And also thanks to the Transforming Education Summit convened by the UN Secretary General last year in September, and immediately followed by the Second World Conference on Early Childhood Care Education in Tashkent, Uzbekistan in November last year, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to continue to place ECCE at the center of strategic policy discussions and political commitment. And this ASEAN policy dialogue on ECCE is one example, one demonstration of a very strong regional political commitment to advance the cause of quality, inclusive education, and early childhood education. We do have a major global and regional momentum to build on right now for ECCE, and we must really seize this opportunity to sustain it. We must also use this opportunity to increase and strengthen better collaboration, coordination across sectors, between countries, across regions, and among developing partners. To facilitate and support the collaboration and coordination, the Global Partnership Strategy for Transformational ECCE was launched last year with the aim to ensure the ECCE would be placed at the center of strategic policy discussion on COVID recovery strategies. And that will be not within only the education sector, but also policy discussions beyond education, including all socio-economic sectors, recognizing and recalling that ECCE is the critical investment in the citizen for tomorrow and has the best return on investment for our societies. I think we all agree that political and financial commitments at the highest level are vital for improving learning and reducing inequalities. And we have to have effective, comprehensive strategies for ECCE, and that requires society's determination to make ECCE a priority. Now, policymakers, schools, communities, we want everyone to work together to recover learning, tackle the deep-rooted systematic challenges we saw, and build resilience to future disruptions. So it is also high time, especially that we only have 7 years to go until we achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, that the commitments made at Incheon in 2015 to introduce 1 year of free and compulsory primary education, as stipulated in SDG 4.2, should become a reality in all countries in this world. And I hope that the ASEAN community will become front runners in realizing this goal in the world. So let us really work together closely for this most noble cause today to transform ECCE that will have an everlasting impact, not only on the individual child, but also for the well-being and happiness of all population in the ASEAN community and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Maki Hayashikawa, the Director of UNESCO Office in Jakarta, for such an illuminating keynote address this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Delegates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a very short break for approximately 10 minutes to enjoy you and to allow you to whet your appetite with the coffee and tea and delicacies. The refreshments have been served to your tables, ladies and gentlemen, so kindly remain seated as we set the stage for the first plenary session of our conference today. And in the meantime, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow us now to present to you a very special visual on the progress and the significant strides that Indonesia has made over the years in early childhood care and education. And these are compiled from our experiences across the nations, from the west to the east of Indonesia, over 17,000 islands in the country. Allow us now to divert your attention again to the big screen and take a look, please, to this next video.
Yang Sebelum adanya PSP sangat kesulitan dalam pembelajaran karena banyak wali murid yang menuntut bahwa anak yang sekolah itu harus bisa belajar menulis, berhitung, dan membaca. Nah, secara umum TK itu tidak harus membaca dan menulis dan berhitung. Nah, di situ kami sangat kewalahan, apalagi kami ini kelompok A dan umur masih di bawah, anak-anak belum tahu apa-apa. Di situ yang kami sangat kesulitan untuk mengajarkan anak memegang pensil, terus menulis, membaca, dan mengenal huruf, dan mengenal angka. Itu sangat kesulitan bagi guru.
Kalau pengajaran calistung kita mau ajarkan ke anak-anak, kan anak-anak TK ini kan bisa dikatakan anak-anak usia dini ya. Anak-anak masih usia dini, mereka itu kan masih usia-usianya bermain. Jadi mereka itu tidak bisa kita paksa untuk harus bisa baca, bisa tulis, dan juga bisa hitung. Kalau menurut saya biarkanlah mereka berproses sesuai dengan usia mereka. Jadi nanti ada saatnya pasti mereka bisa baca, bisa tulis, dan juga bisa hitung. Sikapnya itu luar biasa, ada perubahannya sebelum dan sesudah PSP. Lebih mandiri, rasa percaya dirinya itu lebih oke.
Untuk masyarakat ya alhamdulillah mereka semakin semangat untuk membantu kami dan mensupport kami karena menurut mereka sejak kami mengikuti PSP ini mutu sekolah sudah semakin meningkat. Kami lebih tingkatkan pengetahuan kami di dalam bidang IT sesuai dengan pertama kali kami mengikuti program ini. Untuk bidang IT, alhamdulillah sudah sedikit meningkat, yang mudah-mudahan semakin meningkat lagi. Kemudian untuk guru-guru, mereka sudah mampu mengoperasikan IT, di dalamnya ada PMM juga, mereka sudah bisa masuk untuk melaksanakan beberapa kegiatan yang ada di dalam program PMM itu sendiri.
Program Sekolah Penggerak ini harapan kami bisa dapat meningkatkan kualitas proses pembelajaran, baik belajar di dalam kelas maupun dalam bermain oleh peserta didik. Untuk guru-guru PAUD bisa ditingkatkan sehingga sering informasi itu bisa saling berbagi sesama sekolah untuk dikembangkan di dalam sekolah nanti.
Ya, ini juga. Oh, sudah pernah lihat. Iya. Kalau rasanya garam itu apa ya? Asin. Sudah pernah lihat juga ikan kering? Ya. Jeruk ini warnanya apa ya? Warna kuning. Iya.
Banyak hal yang merubah pola pikir lama menjadi pola pikir baru, itu dalam hal yang pertama dalam segi pemanfaatan digital. Yang kedua, pembelajaran yang guru terapkan itu dulu mungkin tidak seperti yang sekarang yang dituntut oleh PSP ini, kurikulum merdeka ini, yaitu pembelajaran berpusat pada anak. Itu sehingga anak untuk usia PAUD itu anak-anak senang ke sekolah atau senang belajar karena pembelajarannya tidak dipaksakan seperti dulu. Jadi inovasinya itu perbaharui cara pembelajaran di sekolah.
Yang diperbaiki itu untuk bisa meningkatkan kualitas
anak-anak, cara belajar anak-anak supaya mereka meningkatkan belajarnya sesuai dengan kemampuan mereka.
Setelah PSP ini, alhamdulillah kurikulumnya kemudian penerapan pendidikan di sekolah ini sudah mulai berubah dan anak-anak mulai merasa nyaman dan menyenangkan sekali.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, that was a brief glimpse to the accomplishments of Indonesia, paving the way for the younger generations to earn and to deserve better and more comprehensive and higher quality education across the nation. And once again, we kindly inform our delegates, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who require simultaneous interpretations, you can kindly approach our colleagues in the back nearby the interpretation booth to retrieve your simultaneous interpretation device. And kindly be informed that Channel 1 for Bahasa Indonesia and for in English, you can switch to Channel 2. Bagi Bapak Ibu yang membutuhkan penerjemahan dalam bahasa Indonesia, kami silakan untuk menghampiri meja penerjemah di bagian belakang untuk mendapatkan alat bantu penerjemahan. Terima kasih. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we will soon proceed with the next agenda for the conference today, and may we invite our delegates and participants to please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we surely are that you're refreshed and rejuvenated, and you've also enjoyed not only the coffee and tea, but also the company at your table. As we now move on to plenary session 1 of the conference that will shine a light on universal child care and transition to primary education. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first plenary session, allow me to invite our moderator for this session on behalf of the Direktorat of Early Childhood Education, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia. And while you're taking your seats, let's welcome our moderator for session 1, Ibu Arika Nofrani.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan Rahayu. Good morning, Your Excellency, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Arika, and I'm going to be the moderator for your first plenary session on the Southeast Asia policy of dialogue in ECCE. And in this session, we are going to look into the recent researches and policies about ECCE, and also some practices that has been done for ensuring quality access of ECCE that allows sustainability while transitioning from ECCE to primary school. And allow me to briefly introduce you to our speakers. I would like to welcome the speakers for the first plenary session, Professor Matthias Urban, PhD, and Buko Malasari, and also Dr. Alma Ruby Sitorio. Please join me on stage. First of all, I will briefly introduce you to our speakers. Our first speaker is Professor Matthias Urban, PhD, and currently Professor Matthias is a Desmond Chair of ECCE and a Director of the Early Childhood Research Centre at Dublin City University, Ireland. And our second speaker is Bu Komalasari, is the Acting Director of the Direktorat of Early Childhood Education, Ministry of Education, Culture, and Research and Technology. And also our third speaker is Dr. Alma Ruby Sitorio, the Assistant Secretary for Curriculum and Teaching Curriculum Development, Learning Delivery, and Learning Resources of the Philippines Department of Education. Okay. Good morning to you all. Welcome to our first plenary session. And this morning, the highlight for our first plenary is universal childcare and transition to primary school. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to present, and we'll have time for question and answer and comments at the end of the presentation. Okay. Without further ado, let's get started. And I would like to welcome Professor Matthias Urban to present about the universal right-based early childhood education and care. Professor Matthias, the floor is all yours.
Can I get some support with the presentation, please?
When you have, please, show it Professor Matthias' presentation.
Wonderful. Selamat pagi, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this important event. I believe this Southeast Asia Policy Dialogue on Early Childhood Care and Education comes at a crucial time as countries consider future directions of policies and services for young children and their families and communities. I would like to structure my intervention this morning in 3 steps as follows. First, some background and context. Why is it so important that we talk about universal and rights-based early childhood education and care, and why now? Second, some facts. Where are we regarding the global recognition of universal early childhood education and care? And third, and finally, some challenges and tasks ahead. Some background, some context. As countries enter a post-pandemic world, and let's keep in mind that the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over in many parts of the world, we can observe several connected developments. First, many countries had to realize fast and the hard way that early childhood care and education is an indispensable element of any country's critical infrastructure. Without a functioning early childhood education and care system, not much else works in modern complex societies. Analysis show that children are the worst affected by the pandemic, due especially to widespread disruption of systems, programs, services for early childhood development, education and care. Inequalities affecting infants, young children and their families, they predate the COVID-19 pandemic, but they have been compounded by it. And in consequence, young children from marginalized groups in all countries, including the most affluent ones, fare increasingly worse on a whole range of indicators, including stunting, healthy development, learning, protection, and the attainment of their full potential. The global crisis of early childhood development and early child education care systems has had wide-reaching consequences through impacts on gender equality, parents and especially women's abilities to work, attend education services, skills training, and secure basic support services. This, in turn, has had both immediate and long-term implications for countries' economic productivity, governance, social welfare systems, social cohesion, and intergenerational solidarity. For instance, the future of pension systems. And second, the COVID-19 pandemic, which is far from over, has been exacerbated by millions of refugees across the globe and a lack of basic health care and food, children's services, international solidarity. We might recall the term vaccine nationalism, as well as inadequate social coordination and inequality between and within countries in both the global south and global north. Existential, self-inflicted and mutually reinforcing crises include the current pandemic, climate change impacts, threats to biodiversity, inequity, hunger and malnutrition, forced migration, economic risks and poverty, the growing reality of larger scale armed conflict and threats to democracy. But we also realize that countries with multi-sectoral policies in place and more integrated early childhood development, education and care systems tend to cope better with disruption of services. So that leads me to some first conclusions. First, existential crises are no longer the exception. They have become the new normal for humanity. In consequence, terms like resilience, survival, equity, justice are the concepts that will have to be at the center of our discussion about early childhood development and education and care as we plan for the decades ahead. And this applies to both individual programs and services and systems at systems and policy level. Resilient early childhood systems require multi-sectoral policies based on a universal right to education for all children from birth. So where are we with this right to universal early childhood education and care? The right to education is enshrined in several binding human rights legal frameworks. But however, early childhood education and care is mentioned in only one, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, which talks about the equality in preschool between boys and girls. Other legal binding frameworks only refer to primary, secondary, etc. For instance, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. However, in the context of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, General Comment number 7, already published in 2005, states that the Committee on the Rights of the Child interprets the right to education during early childhood as beginning at birth and closely linked to young children's right to maximum development. So it's about integrated approaches and it's about approaches to education beginning at birth. And the committee calls on state parties, and quote from the general comment, to ensure that all young children receive education in the broadest sense, which acknowledges a key role for parents, wider families and communities, participatory with stakeholders in the broadest sense. And more recently, in 2022, the report of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights to Education to the UN General Assembly states that at present legal obligations under international human rights law to provide early childhood care and education are not explicit and are captured piecemeal in multiple instruments. And I continue to quote, there is a need for wider recognition of the right of every child to early childhood care and education and for more clarity regarding its contents and related rights and obligations. And this is what we're here to talk about today. The rapporteur continues and concludes that there are several possible ways forward. I'm not going to sort of just go into any detail about this, but mentioning that there are many possible options. None of them are mutually exclusive in terms of an additional, a new United Nations Human Rights Treaty, amendments to existing documents, and so forth. But there is work to do. So what are the challenges and the tasks ahead and the opportunities that we can open in conversations like this? First of all, the absence of a binding international framework, legal framework on the right to early childhood education and care is disappointing. It will require sustained effort and leadership from state and non-state actors to overcome this lack of commitment. Powerful countries in the global north, for instance, the United States of America, are unlikely to lead on such a project, considering their poor track record in relation to international treaties and their often dysfunctional early childhood systems. Countries in Southeast Asia are showing strong commitment, as we can see today, to early child education and care. Two examples, recent examples, the CEMO-CECE policy brief on universal childcare, published only recently in May this year, and of course the forthcoming ASEAN Declaration on Early Child Education and Care are two very strong recent examples. Countries in the Global South can and should take a lead role in promoting the global agenda of young children's right to education from birth. Indonesia and the network of countries represented in the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education organization are particularly well placed, I would argue, to lead in liaison with similar networks in South America and Africa. Some encouraging international developments already mentioned in the opening keynote. I just want to sort of highlight them again here. The Tashkent Declaration, adopted by the UNESCO World Conference on Early Childhood Care and Education in November 22 in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, specifically talks about the right to education, the right of every young child to quality early childhood care and education from birth to 8 years of age. This is a milestone that we need to cherish and take into account. Recommendation in that document, the Tashkent Declaration, for countries to allocate 10% of their overall education budget to ECCE, which unfortunately had not been agreed as a binding target. So there's work to do. I would also like to point your attention to the Abidjan Principles, which came into light in 2019, that talk about the priority of public education and that state that states must provide free public education of the highest attainable quality to everyone within their jurisdiction as effectively and expediently as possible to the maximum of the available resources. And let's talk about resources as we move forward.
Excuse me, Professor Matthias, can you wrap up in 1 minute?
Nearly there.
Okay, thank you.
And the right to education applies from birth and throughout one's life. So the Tashkent Declaration and the Abidjan Principles, I think, are two key documents that we need to take into account to shape our discussion. Realizing the right to education and care from birth, I would argue, is more than a technical task. Filling the Tashkent Declaration with meaning, realizing the Abidjan Principles for early child education is more than a mere technical task. It's an ethical and political project that requires a shift in culture and commitment to early child education from birth as a global common good. And being an ethical and political project, it will require wide engagement with communities and a wide range of stakeholders, including local leaders, teachers, and all those working in early childhood care and education in formal and informal roles. Urgent tasks ahead, I would suggest, are two. First, we must define the meaning of universal early child education care in the context of individual children's and collective community rights. Universal must mean for all children from birth. Universal, while guaranteed and framed at national level, plays out at local level. And that means achieving universal access requires solid, fundamental resourcing, financing. It does not mean treating all children and communities the same. Within a universal system, special resources will have to be allocated to the most disadvantaged to ensure their rights are realized, something we refer to as progressive universalism. And second, we must redefine the meaning and purpose of education, talking about education from birth. Specifically, not only in relation to the youngest children, the babies we're talking about, we have to go beyond SDG 4.2. We have to talk about more than pre-primary. Education is not the same as schooling or preparing for school. Instead, we have to understand and acknowledge that education in the broadest sense is about meaningful, caring, inspiring, empowering interaction between adults, educators, parents, and children, individually, collectively. It includes, to be clear, changing nappies. So, coming to a conclusion, realizing the right to education from birth requires fundamental rethink of the transition to primary education, another topic of our discussion today. If children are understood to be in education from birth, the notion of transition into education, into the education system becomes problematic. So the shift from early child education that ensures school readiness is required towards a conceptual framework that requires schools to be ready for children instead. That may sound banal, but I think it is a radical proposition that challenges long-established systems of education governance, influence, for instance, between government departments and ministries, but also between state and non-state actors, international NGOs, donor organizations. It cannot be left to teachers and parents to resolve. It requires dedicated leadership from national governments at highest level, for instance, through interdepartmental structures in charge of realizing multi-sectoral and integrated policy frameworks. And to be successful, it requires, for instance, non-state actors and donors to review their priorities, from resourcing and providing early childhood care and education programs to establishing, resourcing, and supporting governments to devise, implement, and evaluate their public policy. Thank you very much, and I'm going to leave you with a quote by my inspiration, Paulo Freire, who reminds us how important it is to start building the future today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Urban, for such informative and comprehensive presentation. Now we would like to invite Bu Komalasari to present about smooth transition from ECCE to primary.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. Warm greeting from Jakarta, Indonesia. I'm Komalasari, the Acting Director of Direktorat of Early Childhood Education of Indonesia, Ministry of Education, Culture, Riset, and Technology. It is such a great honor for me to present smooth transitions from ECCE to primary education in Indonesia in our plenary session this morning. Distinguished guests, first of all, I'm going to talk about the education right of young children that can separate it from the golden age period. Next, please. Next. There are a huge number of research and academic manuscripts have been proven the golden age as critical stage of young children development, for it is the time to build the foundation of motoric, cognitive, and social emotional aspect. In response to this, Indonesia government commit to provide high-quality ECE. Under Sustainable Development Goal 4.2, access and quality are the aspects of that determine the provision of high-quality early childhood educations. Indonesia General Direktorat of ECE, in response to this, is committing to guarding the smooth transitions of the young children from ECE to primary. Guided by international consensus that early childhood periods start from 0 to 8 years old, the ministry undertakes a series of interventions that ensure that transition is well prepared, child centers undertaken through collaborations among primary school and ECE center, as well as parents and local government, and most importantly, guided by appropriate and aligned curriculum. Next. Probably we heard about a story of children who are not receiving their educational rights when entering primary school because they cannot read, write, and count, or in Indonesia, we call it as calistung. There are misconceptions such as developed, the presentation is Indonesia. Okay, thank you. The slide, please. Yes. First, developed ability of children in ECCE is highly focused on calistung and considered as the only evidence of successful learning. Second, the calistung ability is considered as the only evidence of successful learning which can be developed instantly. And the third, the calistung test is still being implemented as a term to enter primary school, even though it is forbidden. The practice is still being implemented. As a result, the misconception of calistung remains. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, in fact, building skill in children need to be done gradually and in fun way so we can achieve the good benefits of learning. The good benefits such as children feel happy in learning, believe that themselves are capable as long as they are willing to try. Children are able to manage their emotions, have a good literacy so they understand words, able to listen and express ideas, and have good numeracy skills so they understand the concept of numbers. If it is not built in this way, then the opposite will happen. For example, children see that learning is burden. They believe that they are not smart because they cannot do calistung, manage emotions, and have low literacy and numeracy skills. Next, we need to end the misconception of learning from now by understanding that the transitions of ECE to primary educations need to run smoothly. The effort to develop children's foundation skill is not stopping at ECE, but continue until early grades of primary educations. Children's foundation skills are developed holistically, not only reading, writing, and counting. Literacy and numeracy skills are built gradually. Basic skill of reading, writing, and counting is needed to be developed from ECE until early class of primary school. However, literacy not just reading and writing, it includes listening skill, understanding of vocabulary, as well as the ability to express ideas. Numeracy is not just about counting, it includes the ability to process and classify informations. Last but not least, school readiness is processes that needs to be respected by education units and parents, so we no longer label children ready or not ready, but assist children until they are ready. Next. We have become more familiar with common learning misconception which can lead to unfulfilled rights for children. How? Number one, the right to enroll in primary school children who have not been through ECE as basic educations. Number two, the right to enroll in ECE to develop children's basic foundation abilities. Number three, the right of children to participate as an independent and unique individual. Next. Let's take a look at the ladder display on the screen together. That assumes that the ladder on the left is a snapshot of the conditions of students when they enter first grade of primary school. We can see that child A and B are equally not through ECE, but child B achievements is better. Child D has a higher achievement than child D, even though both of them have participated in ECE. So the condition of students' condition can be varying. Next. Let's support children regardless of their starting points so they have the right to be nurtured in their foundation skill. The smooth ECE to primary school transition movement safeguards this right by ensuring that every child can have an easy transition. Next. Smooth transition from ECE to primary school should eliminate these three misconceptions. So how can we do that? Through the implementation of three targeted changes in the new academic years. The first is eliminating the Chalistung test as a requirement for the admissions of new students at the primary education level. Second, we are looking for primary school and ECE to prepare various activities to welcome new students so they get to know their school more comfortable and their school becomes their second home. And third, we want to see our primary school and ECE implement learning that develop children's 6 foundation skill. Next. To develop basic foundations ability, there are 3 processes of learning in ECE and first grade of primary. Let us take a look at these 3 important processes. First of all, teachers select learning activities that are giving fun and meaningful experience, as well as measuring the achievement of basic foundations ability. Next, please. Next, please. The second process of developing student basic foundations ability in order to fulfill the transmission 3 is conducting the authentic assessment to ensure children's attain lifelong learners' ability that is not merely formative and summative measurement of children's learning outcomes. Next. The launching of the Merdeka Belajar curriculum or emancipative curriculum positioning ECE as the foundations as school readiness for primary education designed to reduce the gap between these two. In the previous curriculum, there were competency in Indonesia subjects that emphasized recognition of text, implying that children are already or able to read. Next. Next, please. Merdeka curriculum textbook from primary educations, grade 1 also no longer imply that children must be able to read, write, and count. As we seen on the left, textbooks for Indonesia include many visual images, making it easier for grade 1 students to make association between text and image, and especially not implying the grade 1 student must be able to read. Meanwhile, on the right, textbook for mathematics seeks to better guide students to have number awareness by using visual content that helps students understanding the relationship between the number of objects. Next, please. To strengthen the transition of ECE to primary school, in the Ministry of Education's Decree number 5 of 2022 state that the graduate competency standard for ECE are not formulated by age, but as outcomes that needed to be achieved by the end of the phase. The content of this standard is aligned with the 6 foundation skills as well as the learning outcome of ECE and primary school. Next. We must upgrade the competency of ECE teachers so they can teach early grades through a digital learning platform, the Merdeka Mengajar platform. Ministry of Education, Culture, Riset, and Technology has trained teachers and provide tools from education unit to make a smooth transition from ECE to primary school. The material can be accessed on the Merdeka Mengajar platform, independent training series, or through the ECE primary education transition page. Then there is inspiring video. By watching this video, education unit partners, parents can have better understanding of the fun learning of ECE to primary education transition and how it can be done. For ECE and primary education teachers, in addition to the self-study modules, there will be technical training that they can participate in, which will be launched in the second half of this year. Next. And this is the learning tool also organized based on a learning flow that assists teachers in understanding the learning experience that are necessary in ECE and primary education, and let use learning tools on the website and the Merdeka Mengajar platform. Next. As a priority program of the Ministry of Education and Culture of Indonesia, the smooth transition from ECE to primary school needs to be supported by many stakeholders. Therefore, the ministry has mobilized support from all elements in the education ecosystem, as well as parents and community. Honorable attendants, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our presentations. Thank you for listening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Bu Kamalasari, for the insightful presentation. And next, Dr. Torio will present about the transition from ECE to primary school and the practices in Philippines. To Dr. Torio, time is all
Thank you,
yours.
ma'am. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on universal child care and transition to primary education in Philippine setting. Next. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So let me start by saying that the child is one of the most important assets of the nation. Every effort should be exerted to promote his or her welfare and enhance his or her opportunities for a useful and happy life. Relative to this, it is the policy of the Philippine government to put an utmost regard to every individual child, regardless of economic status. That every child has the right to survival, development, special protection, and access to quality early child care and education, which is recognized as the most significant stage in human development. Next, please. Two essential laws enacted early in the past decade mandated the Philippine government to strengthen ECCD. These laws are Republic Act 10410, otherwise known as the Early Years Act of 2013, and RA 10157, otherwise known as the Kindergarten Education Act. The Early Years Act of 2013 is an act recognizing the age from 0 to 8 years as the first crucial stage of educational development and strengthening the early childhood care and development system. The ECCD covers the full range of health, nutrition, early education, next please, and social services development programs that provide for the basic holistic needs for young children from 0 to age 4 and to promote their optimum growth and development. It also involves a multifaceted process of development, which include physical, cognitive, emotional, social, and spiritual, covering the period from pregnancy through the transition from home or ECCD programs into primary school. Next, please. To complement the Early Years Act, one of the support for transition initiatives is Republic Act 10137, otherwise known as the Kindergarten Education Act of 2012. This act is an act institutionalizing the kindergarten education into the basic education system. The Kindergarten Education Act defines kindergarten as a compulsory entry stage to basic education. Section 2 of the Act states that all 5-year-old children shall be provided equal opportunities to avail of accessible, mandatory, and compulsory kindergarten education that effectively promotes physical, social, intellectual, emotional, skills stimulation, and values formation to sufficiently prepare them for grade 1. Kindergarten education is perceived to be the period when the young mind's absorptive capacity for learning is at its sharpest. Next, please. So from RA 10410, or the Early Years Act, to RA 10157, or the Kindergarten Education Act, we have RA 10533, otherwise known as the Enhanced Basic Education Act. So the enactment of RA 10533 led to the full implementation of the Philippines K-12 Basic Education Program. The K-12 covers 13 years of basic education, which include the following stages. The first stage is from kindergarten to grades 1, 2, 3, or the primary school. Key stage 2 is from grades 4 to grade 6, or the middle school. Key stage 3 is from grade 7 to 10, or the junior high school. And key stage 4 is from grades 11 to 12, or the senior high school. The kindergarten curriculum is aimed at enabling kindergarten learners to attain emergent literacy and basic numeracy. Their learning expectations include knowing who they are and their families, exploring their community, appreciating their country, and caring for the world. Whereas grades 1 to 3 serves as a springboard from formal school. This is where the learners are initially exposed to learning areas taught in separate blocks of time. The learners in grade 1 are generally 6 years old, while those in grade 2 are 7 years old. Grade 3 learners are usually 8 years old. Next, please. In terms of access, our enrollment for school year 22-2023 registered a total of 2,149,891 kindergarten learners. 52% of them are boys, while 48% are girls. These were handled by a total of 68,861 kindergarten teachers, with a total of 95,699 classes. The participation rate, which can be seen by the gross enrollment rate, which registered at 85.41%, and the NER, the net enrollment rate, registered at 60.23%, continually manifests a great challenge to achieve higher increase and intensify advocacy of the compulsory policy for access of all 5-year-old children who are not in school, since these children are those coming from preschoolers in daycare centers, transition to kindergarten in the elementary, and eventually transition to grade 1. Next slide, please. Aside from access, the Department of Education has been beset with other challenges in basic education. Relative to this, the Department of Education will be implementing the 2023 to 2028 Matatag Basic Education Agenda. Matatag is a Filipino term for resilience. The Matatag Agenda embodies the current administration's resolve to confront head-on the current challenges of basic education sector in facing particularly that of the learning crisis in the country. The ideas and aspirations of the Matatag Agenda will be realized through the implementation of programs, projects, and interventions outlined in the 4 agenda. The MA stands for to make the curriculum relevant to produce job-ready, active, and responsible citizens. The first TA is to take steps to accelerate the delivery of basic education. The next TA is to take good care of the learners. And the G means give support for teachers to teach better. In support for the Matatag Agenda, we would like to ensure that early learning, right from the start of ECCE, the setting of priorities for learners at the beginning of Key Stage 1 is anchored on sound, developmentally appropriate programs and projects which aim in developing the children's foundational skills, coupled with bigger chunks on the formation of values and attitudes which are equally important on the academic skills. Next slide, please. Again, under the Matatag agenda, the curriculum and the learning delivery modalities must be aligned with the core priorities that are learner-centered, inclusive, and developmentally appropriate, relevant, responsive, and research-based, culture-sensitive, contextualized, use pedagogical approaches like play, activity-based, constructivist, inquiry-based, reflective, collaborative, and integrative. It ensures focus on the fundamental skills and strengthen literacy and numeracy program through play-based or fun learning positive environment. Still aligned on the Matatag agenda, next slide please, is to strengthen complementary activities to continue bridging strategic efforts across different agencies and stakeholders. To mention some of these activities is the conduct of our national early registration and the organization of our monitoring system for the seamless transition of our daycare learners to kindergarten to primary education. Next slide, please. The next category is on curriculum, pedagogies, and assessment. For this, we would like to establish developmentally appropriate learning environment to ensure seamless transition in the foundational skills in curricula and pedagogy. Next slide, please. And of course, the most important influence on the learning development of our learners are the teachers. So we need to conduct continuous professional development to ensure support for trainings like the strengthening of learning action cells. Next slide, please. Finally, as guided by the SDG agenda and the DepEd Matatag agenda, we stand to strengthen our inclusive education program. We will endeavor that all learners, no matter what their backgrounds are, will be afforded quality learning opportunities and services. And by working together in implementing the multi-sectoral strategic development plans from ECCD to kindergarten to grades 1 to 12, we can achieve our vision that by the end of 2030 agenda, we will ensure that no Filipino learners will be left behind. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Dr. Almatorio, for the presentation. And unfortunately, due to our limited time, we cannot take any questions right now, but feel free to have discussion later. And before we end this session, I would like to conclude some of the topic that we have learned today. From the presentation, we have learned how important ECCE is for the future of humanity, and realizing there is a right of ECCE from birth is more than just a technical task, like Professor Matthias said, and we need to internalize it and in this process involving the community to strengthen and act our commitment to ECCE. It is also important to not just provide access to quality ECCE, but ensure there's a smooth transition between ECCE and primary school, and practices from Indonesia and the Philippines have given us insights about how to bridge the transition and not allowing any children to left behind in learning. Okay, and finally, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the speakers, Professor Matthias Urban and Buko Malasari, and also Dr. Alma Torio for the insightful and interesting presentation, and also all the participants. Please give applause to our speakers and for you all. Thank you so much for your attention this morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I give you back to the MC.
Thank you very much, our moderator, Ibu Arika Nofrani from the Directorate of Early Childhood Education, Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology of the Republic of Indonesia, and our array of esteemed speakers for session panel 1. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. What an illuminating session. Thank you very much indeed. May we now invite our moderator and speakers to return to their seats, please. Thank you.